Well, good evening and welcome to week 11 of Tracking the Tropics. I'm CBS 17 Chief Meteorologist Wes Hohenstein, and I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've got a new tropical depression in the Atlantic to talk about and a new set of updated forecasts for the rest of the season to dissect. We're also going to Miami, Florida tonight and the National Hurricane Center to talk to a hurricane specialist about the season so far and, more importantly, what's to come. Plus this.
Hello, I'm John Carroll in Roanoke, Virginia. Over 50 years ago, Hurricane Camille slammed into the Gulf Coast as a Category 5, destroying portions of the region. But she wasn't done yet. Moving inland and turning to the east, she destroyed portions of Virginia. I'll be discussing that tonight.
Okay, John, we'll talk to you in a few minutes. Hard to believe a week ago it was Hurricane Isaias impacting the United States. Over the weekend, some of us felt an earthquake, but we're back on the tropics tonight. Just before 5 o'clock Eastern time this evening, the National Hurricane Center initiated advisories on Tropical Depression number 11, and there it is close up, way out in the open waters of the Atlantic. This was a disturbance we'd been watching for the last few days, and earlier today there was a 90% chance of it developing, and obviously that came to fruition today. Tropical Depression 11. Let's first do the eye test. If you just kind of step back and take a look at the last 12 hours, it sure doesn't look that impressive. And to be honest with you, I'm not all impressed by it. And the reason why it looks a little ragged is because there is a little upper level wind shear. But today, the National Hurricane Center saw a little more tight circulation and a little more well-defined center, and that's why they upgraded it to Tropical Depression 11. Here are the latest statistics. Again, this is from 5 o'clock from the National Hurricane Center. That's the most recent information they've put out. Winds are 35 miles per hour, gust up to 45. The pressure's above 1,000. Anytime there's a system with a pressure above 1,000 millibars, you know, it really just doesn't have the oomph yet to pull itself together. The higher the pressure, the more disorganized the system and weaker it is. The lower the pressure, the stronger it's getting. And it's moving to the west at 16 miles per hour. As we look at the bigger picture, you can still, it is way out there still, almost 3,000 miles from the coast of the Carolinas. So whatever's going to happen with this system, we have a lot of time to figure it out. And if you look at the big picture, I mean, there is hardly nothing else going on in the Atlantic right now. But as we look a little closer, as I mentioned, this system is still rather disorganized. Over the next couple of days, with the warm water underneath it in the ocean, it is expected to increase in intensity, but it's also expected to eventually run into some dry air. And this storm is coming from a place where we commonly see storms this time of year. This originated as a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa, and over the last couple of days, it's gotten a little better organized. You can see there's some other thunderstorm activity out there. So just because this is the only thing happening right now, it doesn't mean over the course of the next week there won't be more systems in addition to Tropical Depression number 11. I want to first start as we look at the forecast with the computer models. So these are the afternoon runs. All of the evening models haven't yet to come in. So two things we always look for when we look at the spaghetti plots are all the computer models. We look for the cluster. Where are most of the models sending this thing? And we look for the trends. Where have they been moving? Which way have they been shifting? So this is very early on. So the forecasts are not going to be the best forecast ever. And they're going to evolve over the coming days as we continue to gather more information, more computer runs, more data coming in from the satellites. But right now you can see everything pretty much in good agreement and not a whole lot of variation up until a point we get to about Sunday, which is right here. Still shy of the Caribbean. From there, things kind of go every which direction, which tells us there's some uncertainty. But remember, these are forecast paths of where the center of this system could be if it survives. And that's a pretty big if based on a couple of things, which I'll get to in just a second. But the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center has it continuing off to the west and eventually either late tomorrow night or Thursday becoming another tropical storm. We are already on the J named storm. It would be Josephine. But notice from Thursday to Friday to Saturday and Sunday, as it continues to move west, we don't see any huge jumps in the wind speed. So it's not like this is going to become a huge tropical storm on the verge of a hurricane. This is going to barely make it to tropical storm status and then maybe strengthen a little as it gets closer to the United States. But whatever happens, here's where it's going to be Sunday, still barely to Puerto Rico. So that leaves us still plenty of time. Even if something were to change and something were to further develop, it would not impact the East Coast until probably the middle of next week. And again, that's a big if. I want to bring in the water vapor satellite because this tells a good story of what could eventually tear this system apart. In addition to some upper level wind shear, there's also a lot of dry air, which right now that system is being shielded from all the dry air, which shows up on the water vapor satellite as orange, but there is plenty of it out there. So the combination of some dry air and some upper level wind shear will probably prevent this from becoming a major system. But again, it is still very early and a lot could happen over the next couple of days. But as I mentioned, we are already through the first column. There's 7, 8. Isaias was number 9. So Josephine would be number 10. And if it forms before the next 2 weeks, before August 22nd, it would be the earliest J-named storm on record. Now, over the past week, we've got 2 different organizations who have updated their hurricane forecast for the rest of the season. Let's talk about both of them. They came out late last week, the first of which, NOAA, the National Hurricane Center, the Climate Prediction Center, our government essentially. Their original outlook in May, their forecast called for 13 to 19 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, 3 to 6 major hurricanes, category 3, 4, or 5. The average numbers, 12, 6, and 3. So already the forecast before the season started was for an above average season. Well, we know that's coming true since we're already on the verge of storm number 10. Here's the update from last week. Now 19 to 25 named storms, 7 to 11 becoming hurricanes, 3 to 6 major. So all categories have gone up fairly significantly. The day before NOAA issued their updated hurricane forecast outlook, Colorado State University issued there. We talked to Dr. Phil Klosbach. He's the leader of that group out there a couple weeks ago right here on Tracking the Tropics. Their original forecast in April was for 16, 8, and 4. Named storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes. Remember, the average, 12, 6, and 3. So all of those numbers were above it already. We knew it was going to be an active season. The July update increased those numbers to 29 and 4. Well, the update that came last week, 24 named storms, 12 hurricanes, and 5 major hurricanes. I want to go back to the name list. The 2 top thresholds for the forecast named storms, 24 and 25. This list only has 21 names on it. It would take us all the way through W, 21. 22, 23, 24, and 25 would take us only for the second time ever into the Greek alphabet. Alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. So once again, like we did in 2005, this could be a season that we exhaust the name list and go into the Greek alphabet. Now trust me, not hoping for that, but that is a distinct possibility based on the 2 forecasts. And here's why all the agencies are thinking there's going to be more activity. 4 main reasons. Warmer ocean temperatures. Remember, hurricanes get their energy, their strength, their power from the warm ocean water. It's got to be above 80 degrees, and it's way above 80 degrees. In fact, we're seeing the 4th warmest ocean temperatures on record, and that means more storm fuel. Number 2, low vertical wind shear. Remember how we talked about tropical depression number 11 having some upper level wind shear that's trying to tear the system apart? Well, overall, we've got low vertical wind shear in the forecast out in the Atlantic, and that will help hurricanes and tropical systems develop further. The third reason why we're expecting even more activity, a busy African monsoon season. Remember all those thunderstorms we showed you off the coast of Africa? If they're having a busy active monsoon season, those are the systems that start over the African continent and get blown across the Atlantic. So if there's more of them over Africa, there's more waves coming off the coast of Africa and a better chance we could see more systems develop. And the 4th reason why a La Nina could be developing, and when there is a La Nina, we tend to have more activity. So for those reasons, I would not be surprised if we make it all the way through. And here's why we really start to pay more attention in August and September. As we look at the graph of hurricane activity throughout the year, the season starting here June 1st, ending on the other side of the graph on November 30th. It peaks September 10th. Well, look where we are now. This is over the course of 100 years, hurricane and tropical storm activity. We are really starting to climb the mountain and about ready to see activity ramp up. The activity we see now is also very similar to what we see in the middle of October. So there's a period between pretty much now and the first couple weeks of October that we generally see most of our activity. And where do we see it form? Well, there are three main spots that most of our systems form in August. Number one is the Gulf of Mexico. From there, they usually move north or somewhere into South Texas and Mexico. The second place we see is the Western Caribbean, and from there, a lot of times they flow into the Gulf of Mexico. But really, like we're seeing with Tropical Depression 11 and a lot of the systems that we can start to watch from far away is north of the Caribbean and in the open waters of the Atlantic. Those are the three places that we most likely see development over the course of a year. And here's why after August 1st, some people say this is when the real hurricane season begins. After August 1st, we get 84% of our tropical storms, we get 91% of our hurricanes, and we get 95% of our major hurricanes after August 1st. So yes, the real hurricane season and a lot more activity is still more likely to come. Joining us now on Tracking the Tropics from arguably one of the busiest places in the country the past couple of months, the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. And we're going to spend a good 5 minutes with Dr. Michael Brennan, the branch chief of the Hurricane Specialist Unit. And I'm going to start with asking him the question that's kind of been on everyone's mind. We kind of knew it was going to be a busy season, but are you surprised, Doctor, about how busy it's been to start off?
This hurricane season, we were expecting a lot of activity. I think one thing that's been maybe a little surprising is how much of that activity has gone on and directly affected the United States this year. We've had 4 tropical storms that have basically either made landfall or come close enough to cause direct impacts. We've now had 2 hurricane landfalls. We had Hannah in Texas, and we've had Isaias in North Carolina. And all this has happened before we basically got to the second week of August. And that's been a pretty remarkable stretch to have that much in the way of direct impacts already. We've had tropical storm, hurricane, and storm surge watches and warnings for almost all of some portion of the U.S. East and Gulf Coast, all the way from Texas up to Maine already with the activity we've had this year. So while we were expecting activity, it's been very concentrated in the western half of the basin. We've had a lot of systems that have formed very close to and then affected land in a very short period of time.
Mike, last week, you and Colorado State University issued updates to the hurricane forecast that called for even more activity, and we're using words like hyperactive, extra busy, lots of different adjectives to describe how much more we're going to see. Can you kind of describe to us what's going on in the atmosphere to result in these higher forecasts?
So, what we're looking at in terms of the updated seasonal forecast for activity this season is the potential for a very active or hyperactive Atlantic hurricane season. We've had all these ingredients sort of come together: warmer than normal sea surface temperatures, more active Western African monsoon, lower than normal vertical wind shear, and then now we have the possibility of La Nina developing as we get into the peak of the hurricane season, which results in even a further reduction in wind shear over portions of the Atlantic basin. So that really sets the stage for a very active upcoming several weeks here as we go from mid-August all the way through mid-October. So those are sort of the background conditions that are occurring on top of what's already been a sort of a background active state in the Atlantic basin going all the way back for 20 plus years at this point.
I'd like to kind of switch gears to the other big topic engulfing our country, the pandemic. How has the National Hurricane Center been dealing with social distancing and continuing to do forecasts and tracking hurricanes during coronavirus?
So at NHC, we've taken lots of steps to keep our staff safe and healthy. We've implemented all the PPE and social distancing guidelines that have been suggested by the CDC and others. We're keeping only essential staff in the building working on site. We have other folks teleworking, and even for folks who are in the building working during a storm, they're maintaining more distance, trying to stay apart more so than usual, and just really trying to minimize the number of essential operational personnel that we have in the building down to what we need to get the job done so that we can keep everybody safe and healthy as we head into the peak of the hurricane season.
Again, Dr. Michael Brennan from the National Hurricane Center is with us on Tracking the Tropics tonight. I've got to ask you, a lot of people have been starting to compare this season to the record-breaking season in 2005 when we had 28 named storms. Is that accurate and a fair comparison to compare what we're living through now with what happened in 2005?
You know, people, when they do hear hyperactive hurricane season, the possibility for, 25 plus named storms, it's natural that people are going to go back to think about the 2005 season. But, every season, every hurricane season is different. The character of the storms is different. The areas they're going to affect are going to be different. The impacts that those storms are going to bring could be different. I mean, I suppose the one connection people could take away is that 2005 was a very busy season in terms of U.S. impacts from hurricanes. We've already seen that this year. We've had 2 hurricane landfalls already before we got into the second week of August. So the main message is for people around the United States coastline and other areas that are vulnerable to hurricanes in the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Coast is that you have to be ready to be impacted, perhaps impacted again as we go through these next few weeks. Really the bulk of the hurricane season activity doesn't really start until we get to the middle part of August and go through late August, September, and into October. So we have much of this activity. We may not even be through half of the activity yet. So just because people have seen a storm maybe directly affect them or maybe come close to them, but sort of be a miss or not much of an event, it certainly doesn't mean you can't be affected by future storms and the potential large number of storms we're going to have as we go through this season.
And I'll get you out of here on this one, Dr. Brennan. We did some comparisons since Isaias hit North Carolina, and the 5-day track verification was only 200 miles off of where you guys said the storm was going to be. That's a great job. Have you guys been able to do any analysis to figure out what went right with that forecast yet?
We haven't really had a chance to go back and look in detail at what's happened during Isaias or all the other previous storms. We're still busy dealing with the tropical activity that we have ongoing. We really don't have a chance to go back and take a close look at the post-analysis for each storm until maybe weeks or even months after the storm is over, when we can get all the data in and conduct the final best track analysis and then run the final verification and see how the forecasts have gone. Isaias was a challenging storm to forecast in many ways, from its formation all the way through its track, its interaction with Hispaniola, the sort of ups and downs in its intensity and structure as it was east of Florida, where it weakened below hurricane strength, and then it's re-strengthening back to a hurricane as it reached the coast of southern North Carolina. And then all the way to its pretty significant high wind impacts that affected much of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast states and caused widespread tree damage and power outage and some fatalities. So, every storm has its own challenges. Just because our average errors may be, pretty good, that doesn't mean that we can't have storms that throw us a curveball in terms of track and are going to, unfortunately, have situations where our track forecast errors are larger than average. But we try to take that into account. We do take that uncertainty into account when we, issue tropical storm and hurricane and storm surge watches and warnings. We account for that uncertainty in the track and the intensity and the size forecasts of the storm. And we try to build in that safety margin so that people can be prepared for what could affect them in terms of the storm surge, the wind, the rainfall, and all those other hazards.
All right, that's Dr. Michael Brennan from the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Thanks for being on the show with us tonight, and good luck the rest of the season. And he tried to downplay it a little, but they really did do a great job with Hurricane Isaias. And we talked about the 2005 season. The 90s had Andrew, Floyd, and Fran. But before that, Hurricane Camille hit the United States this month, 51 years ago. The devastation wasn't just confined to the coast, though. To take us back to 1969, let's bring in John Carroll from WFXR up in Roanoke, Virginia. John, Hurricane Camille was a generational storm for so many, from Louisiana to right where you are in Virginia, kind of surprisingly. Can you start us off tonight with the overview of what that storm did along its devastating path?
Yeah, and it was an extremely devastating path that was just an incredible amount of energy that was generated by this. And I know that you had worked down in the Gulf Coast area, and people are still talking about that. So initially, we'll start out here. It was tropical depression on August 14th, 1969. Now remember, 1969 is when we landed on the moon. if you recall that. And again, it moved up and quickly gained strength. It was a Category 5 in the Gulf of Mexico. And here is the statistic. Here are the statistics of it. Sustained winds at landfall at 175 miles an hour, and storm surge, they call it the waves, was 25 feet. And 143 fatalities. The actual landfall was Bay St. Louis in Mississippi on August 17th. Now, Wes, you were in the Gulf, so are people still talking about it? Were they still talking about it when you were there?
Yeah, I was there in the 90s in South Louisiana, so we're still talking, 30 years removed. I know we're a lot longer now, but yes, it was still on the tip of people's tongue. This was before Katrina, which I think is the next generational storm, unfortunately. But yeah, and you talked about landing on the moon. Just think about how long ago that was. But it didn't stop in Louisiana. It ripped a path all across the U.S., didn't it?
Yeah, it certainly did. And the thing that was interesting about it was it became relatively benign relatively quickly. So let's take a look here at the quick path of this. And again, by less than 24 hours, 8 p.m. on August 18th, tropical storm moving inland through Mississippi. This is the actual path. And then as it continued to move forward and up in through Kentucky, this is when everything started to come together. Sometimes when you have an event that just takes a lot of pieces of the puzzle to come together for some extreme devastation, that's what was occurring with this, as at 8 p.m. on August 19th, it was a Tuesday night, this moved right across the Commonwealth and exited on August 20th. So what were the pieces of the puzzle? What was the recipe for disaster to come together? And I'm just going to show you these right now as a general synopsis, and then I'm going to break each one down real quick. Okay, here's the path right over top of Roanoke, right where I'm standing right now, just to the south of the city of Roanoke. We have a cold front as well. Now, as this moved across, this is what we see. And of course, the flow coming around counterclockwise, and I've highlighted Nelson County. Nelson County is just to the north of the Roanoke region. We have the cold front. We have this green area. I'll explain what that is in a second. And then we also have, again, the Blue Ridge Mountains. And they were instrumental in generating historic flooding in the region on August 19th and 20th, excuse me. So here's what we have. Here are the three major pieces of that puzzle that we have to put together. Plenty of moisture available in and around the coastal plain and the Piedmont. We had dew points 78, 79 degrees, a lot of water that was available to be pulled in from this storm. Then also, we have a cold front. Now, the cold front is blocking and lifting that rain as it comes into the region. This is the path right over Roanoke. Here's that cold front that just kind of hung out there for a while. And then, this is what we have. We have the topography. Upslope along the east face of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that is really another piece of the puzzle that really devastated everything in the region, in addition to the fact that they got more rain physically possible, I believe, than actually could fall. Some people saying there was 27 inches of rain in a 5 to 6 hour period. And here is the terrain, mountainous terrain, a collection zone, if you will. Right? Let's get down a little bit lower, and you see the rain falling. I drew in a couple of these paths as the rain would fall down in through these mountains. And these are about 4,500-foot peaks and such, so there's a lot of room to carry this water down. There are a tremendous number of landslides and mudslides and debris flows, in addition to the amount of water that we had. In fact, here is a picture of the Ty River as it goes out to the James, and this actually was a bridge that went across that river. And again, you can just see how the landscape was carved up by the water. And also, some of the houses as well just flipped on their sides with this tremendous force of rain. Here are the totals for the rainfall amounts, and we're looking at about 25 to 27 inches of rain in the bullseye there, and that is Nelson County. So again, here's what we have. In and around Macy's Mill and throughout the region, devastation, not only because of the 27 inches of rain, which is incredible, but it was also nighttime. People were asleep. people weren't anticipating this. The Weather Service was, I think, calling for increasing cloud cover and scattered showers. Multiple factors were contributing to this. Rainfall totals near 30 inches, and the number of people that died in the Virginia area, 153, 130 some, and then 30 some missing as well. So here's what we have. Landslides, debris flows, hardest hit communities, well, they were along the Tye River, which had 22 fatalities, and Davis Creek and Rockfish River, 52 fatalities. Now, I know not everybody knows Nelson County, but again, it just gives you an idea of the scope of the devastation. Nearly 30 inches in 6 to 8 hours, just try to imagine that, and 25-foot walls of mud, water, and debris was occurring, and again, all at night. There were some accounts where people were saying that they couldn't see anything, but they could smell the pine trees as they snapped. And they're like, that shouldn't be right. The smelling of that sap that they could get. It was a lot of pine trees in the area. So again, this is something that was also kind of interesting, and we're going to talk about the technology too, Wes, as we have here. These are the National Weather Service statements. This one here is out of Richmond at about 6:45. It's west central counties have been deluged with rain. Now, the only reporting station that actually gave rainfall amounts was Clifton Forge at about 8 to 10 inches. Here's another statement coming out of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. states that at about 3:39, quite heavy rains have been reported in portions of west central Virginia. And then this is an interesting teletype coming out of Kentucky. This is a state that is right to our west. Kentucky at 5:20. Remains of Camille did a wonderful job of watering the farms and lawns across Kentucky. So, Wes, you and I were talking earlier about just the different types of technology. Do you remember seeing technology like this?
The old DIFAX charts, you know, something that stuck out to me, John, that the dew point close to 80 degrees. You know, in a typical summer in the mid-Atlantic, we complain when it gets into the mid-70s, but when you get close to 80, it's a whole nother ballgame. But very interesting, the technology back then. It's hard to say it was bad because that's the best they had at the time, but it was so different. It makes us so thankful for the great tools we have today. But what did meteorologists have to look at besides that map behind you? And how did the public find out about what was coming their way? How were they warned?
Right, exactly. And that was the problem, too, because a lot of times, a lot of those NOAA weather radios were just for people on the coast that were getting that kind of information. And then the satellite imagery. Sometimes they didn't even take satellite imagery at night. We take it seemingly constantly here. And these are the images. And these are the different days, okay? We are starting out with the 14th, 15th, all the different progressions of Camille. It's even hard to make out what it is. Here's August 17th. Okay, again, all these different images are what you had to work with. I remember when I first started, once every 6 hours, we would get kind of a map, or I guess it was a picture from space that would come across in our fax machine. And that was our one image that we would get. I'm dating myself here, but that's what we were looking at. And then some other satellite images, and we compare them. Again, Camille in 69, and you talked about 05. This is Wilma, and you can see the difference in these. You know, just the technology has increased exponentially, and of course we've gotten better in, of course, giving people a heads up of what's going on. You talked about Isaias and the warnings that we had with that, and all the perfect track within 200 miles, I believe you said. So unbelievable there. And we also think about the fatalities, too, because we're inland here in Roanoke, so we think more about that rather than the storm surge. And water continues to be the larger factor that does cause death. And only 4% of these water deaths, water is red, other is the blue. Others would be heart attacks and hit by debris and such. But again, water continues to kill, and this is from 2016, 17, and 18. And then also, this is kind of a good story here, if there is such a thing, with only 16 directly related fatalities from Michael, which was the other, or another, other the four. Category 5 that moved on through. So again, 16 versus, what was it, 143 and along the coast, and over 150 here in Virginia. And again, that's the thing that we have to talk about, is that our technology is saving lives. It is helping people. It is getting people away from the coast. The thing that's kind of interesting is we evacuate the coasts, but yet a lot of these deaths are inland, right, in the inland flooding.
Inland flooding. And Camille, in a way, wasn't so different than some of our more recent storms, meaning it is bad on the coast wherever a storm makes landfall, but the inland flooding back then, right, and with storms in the last couple of years, like Florence had dropped 36 inches on the coast, and what you're telling us about almost 30 inches, that inland flooding is no joke.
Yeah, and at the inland flood, we had Michael and Florence that moved through our area, just in the bottom on our south side locations, and we had a few fatalities with that. I think it was 5 and 6 fatalities through those two storms that came through. And then, of course, then there was Harvey, which just didn't stop raining. Right.
Real quick, John, I'll finish up with this. You know, Isaias, in our near-term memory a week ago, what did you guys have up in Virginia from Isaias?
Well, we actually got the classic glancing blow. We were prepared to get ready in our eastern counties, in Halifax County and Charlotte counties. But I was here late watching all the flow coming. I mean, it stayed strong through the coastal plain. And you and I talked earlier about the tornadoes that were coming through, and the signatures on the radar. It was lit up. There were debris balls. There was just an intense amount of storms, and of course those outer bands, as they come in, they could very easily have curved into our area. So we definitely dodged all the devastation from that. So we were lucky this far inland. So that was a good thing for us.
Yeah, and let's hope we all have a break for another week and a half or so as we keep an eye on what could be Josephine. John, thanks for a bit of history tonight and for joining us on Tracking the Tropics. That's John Carroll up in Roanoke, Virginia. Good to see you, John.
Thank you.
All right, and that's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us on Tracking the Tropics. Remember, we're here every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern during the Atlantic hurricane season. We appreciate you spending part of your night with us live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm Wes Hohenstein. Take care.